Probably every child of God has had that distressing feeling at one time or another of being abandoned by the Lord. I mean, no longer does he receive those answers to prayer. No longer does she sense the Lord's presence in the daily rounds of life. The heavens seem like brass, and the wonderful promise, when they call, I will answer, kind of rings hollow. At such times, not merely does he receive no answer, he receives silence. We've embarked on an exploration into an answer to the silence of our request for God's help. Now, various answers are being presented as to why God has not intervened favorably for your request. These possible answers are invitations to contemplation. Okay, again, I want to warn you that none of these explanations may fit your situation. But if one does, you're still going to be left with an answer that you really don't want, okay? What we'll do then is we'll push on and with some suggestions as to what to do when the desires of our heart are met in silence. I think in the church, we have been sold a bill of goods that makes us think that as Christians, we will always be victorious when dealing with the things of this world. I mean, God is going to prosper us, and so we think American dream prosperity. We think God is going to protect us, and so we imagine an army of angels guarding us and nothing bad can break through those ranks. We think that God is going to provide for us, so we wait expectantly, ignoring the possibility that we have been empowered to be our own provision. Things, oh my gosh, things in life and circumstances and situations, they are so often contrary to what we consider God's blessing in our lives. And when bad things happen, we might conclude that, well, maybe God isn't loving. Maybe he's not caring. Or worse, maybe he's impotent to help. He doesn't have the power. And worse still, maybe he just doesn't exist at all. When our expectations of God's intervention don't match up with the reality that we're in, you know what? It can be faith-shattering. So let's look at some reasons for unanswered prayer. Unanswered prayer number 6. Perhaps God has something better for you. It's ancient history now, but it was 1989, and my time at Calvary Church of the Nazarene in Memphis, Tennessee had come to an end, and I was looking for another ministry position. Now, in our system, when you're looking for a new assignment, you contact the district superintendent and ask to be considered. 51 letters of introduction went unanswered. 51. I was wondering if God was directing me into something other than full-time congregational ministry. Unemployment. With a new baby. It was looming. So I did what every person in that situation would do. We prayed and we went on vacation. And it was during that vacation that I was contacted by a district superintendent that I had never sent a resume. God had something better for me than the places that I thought I wanted to go. So sometimes God answers in silence as he's working out the details to do immeasurably more than you can even imagine. Why unanswered prayer number 7? Perhaps our motives in prayer are selfish. If you recall our teaching on intercessory prayer, you know that when someone prays for you, especially someone who has no skin in the game, their prayer is unselfish. And an unselfish prayer is powerful. And I know I have prayed my share of selfish prayers. I mean, it's difficult not to ask for things that will benefit you. In fact, that's one of the things we're supposed to be doing, asking God to provide. But have you ever wondered why you've never won the Lotto?
Never played. You don't
I know you've never played, but it's just as well that you didn't. But if you have played and didn't win, remember James 4:3. When you ask, you did not receive because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your pleasures. Hmm. We live in a country that has many, many luxuries, the most affluent society, I think, in the world. We don't realize this because it's what we've known all our lives. And our consumer culture always encourages us to acquire the newest, the best, the most prestigious. We want VIP treatment. You know what? Those aren't needs. They're not. My suggestion is you pray that God meets your needs, and then ask others to intercede for you so that those needs be met. Why unanswered prayer number 8? Perhaps God is allowing you to struggle just for a little while to draw you into a deeper relationship with Him. I mean, God's silence is always an invitation to contemplation. Always an invitation. Do we need to surrender and accept? Do we exercise faith and trust in the face of a preponderance of evidence that suggests otherwise? You know, over and over when you read about the lives of the faithful, we see that deprivation, adversity, scarcity, and suffering often produce a superior character quality in the individual. Well, prosperity and ease and abundance often does just the opposite. We get flabby in the faith. So struggling with the silence of God can be character building for you. If we use the silence to move closer to God, then we'll experience a victory, a prosperity, protection, a provision that we didn't expect, but it'll be there. Why unanswered prayer number 9? Perhaps a positive answer to our prayer would violate someone else's free will. Okay? We say that God is control, and then we also say that we have free will. Those two ideas, they clash. Okay? They clash. Free will, God's control. They don't sit together well. The truth, I believe, must lie somewhere between a puppeteer God and a laissez-faire, hands-off God. I know this, though. God will not violate a person's sovereignty. God will not make a person do something that they do not want to do. Now, certainly God can create circumstances that push a person in the right direction. I mean, consider Jonah. He eventually decided that it was better to do what God wanted him to do than to stay fish food. Your prayers, my prayers, won't change a person. Now, they may help to create an environment conducive to change, but God will not force a person against their will. Why unanswered prayer number 10? Perhaps God is answering your prayer, but He's doing it subtly and slowly through the power of influence rather than control. Let me face it, we like microwaves, instant coffee makers. You have one? Instant coffee maker? You put the pot in, hit the button, instant coffee. Cell phones, we like our text messages, we like our emails. And we also like instant answers to our prayers. Maybe it's taking time for God to set all the right necessities in place to answer your prayer. I have a nursing need. I need one or two people for Sunday and Saturday mornings. And I can't help but think that God may be speaking to those who can help, but they're hard of hearing. They're slow in understanding. They're ignoring the urging of the Spirit. But God has somebody out there that He wants to work with Grant, who'll mesh well. So I'm just waiting. Hey, your answer is coming. It's just taking time. So in the time, stay faithful. Keep expecting. Remain hopeful and persistent in asking God to meet the need. Now, perhaps one of those perhapses feels right to you. If so, grab hold of it. Find comfort in it and find strength in it. Find hope to keep on keeping on. But if not, let's try to figure out a way to deal with the silence of unanswered prayer. God's favorites at times, God's favorite people at times, I think God has favorite people. I just do. You're probably one of the ones he favors. But at times, they experience this bewildering silence in times of difficulty and need, of great difficulty and need. Consider Job. He is a devout follower of God. And in Job chapter 30, verse 20, he says this, I cry to you for help, and you do not answer me. I stand, and you only look at me. A lot of folks have certainly felt like Job, and now I have. Michael Card is a Christian artist, and he sang Andrew Peterson's song, The Silence of God. The lyrics read like this. It's enough to drive a man crazy. It'll break a man's faith. It's enough to make him wonder if he's ever been sane. When he's bleeding for comfort from thy staff and thy rod. And the heaven's only answer is the silence of God. So, this is not an uncommon experience. I mean, in the silence, it feels like God's gone on vacation. When you feel that way, remember it's a feeling. It's a feeling. God promises that he will never leave you or forsake you. In the silence, trust the promise, not the feeling. It's hard to do this, but it is the right thing to do. Trust what you were sure of in the light. Don't forsake in the silence. Okay? Psalms 101. Psalm 10, verse 1 and 13:1. Put the two together. Scripture says this. The psalmist writes, why do you stand afar off, O Lord? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? How long will you hide your face from me? Within the silence, as you continue to trust, you can lament. Now, lament is basically a complaint to God, okay? It's a soul cry against the injustice that you suffer. Now, it can take the form of an accusation. Why didn't you do this, God? It can take the form of anger. I'm so mad at you, God. I certainly have raged against the silence. You know what? It doesn't help overcome the pain or change the situation, but rather what it does, it diffuses. It depressurizes. And probably most important, it's real and it's honest. A lament is part of mourning, an expression of grief, and every loss needs to be grieved. Now, some folks that I know are a lot more mature than I am, and they can take the worst in stride. I've seen it over and over again. They have been through so much that their testimony is, well, God came through for me last time. He'll come through for me again. And it's no big deal, but the whole world is crumbling around. It's okay, God and I are going to partner through this. Well, I've not mastered that attitude towards silence. It always takes me a little bit to get back in stride, because why? I like perfection. Guess who's disappointed a lot? Oh, it's one of those hang-ups I got to get rid of. I can't tell you this, that at the end of mourning, though the sadness remains, there is comfort, there is a peace that surpasses understanding, and you will learn to live your life to the full while carrying the loss. In silence, it's wise to search for acceptance of the situation. Now, this too is very difficult. You don't want what has happened, what is happening, or what's going to happen. You don't want it. There is soul anguish, there is uncertainty, and there's fear inside. You know what? Let's travel in our minds to the Garden of Gethsemane the night that Jesus was arrested. Mark chapter 14, verses 32 through 36. And this is what we read there at the Word. And they went to a place, they would be the disciples of Jesus. They went to a place called Gethsemane, And Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." And then he took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. And he said, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death." And he said to them, "Stay here and keep watch." And going a little further, he fell to the ground and prayed, if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me." Have you ever been so deeply distressed, so troubled, your soul so overwhelmed, to the point that you thought, it'd just be better if I wasn't here anymore, that I was dead? Death is a kind of a permanent solution to temporary problems. Probably not the wisest thing to do. Well, Jesus cries out to the Father. That term Abba, it's a term of endearment. It means, Daddy, help me. Daddy. Luke 22:44. And being in anguish, Jesus prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Jesus prayed and he heard silence. But in that silence, he resigned himself to acceptance. Mark 14:36. Yet not what I will, but what you will. Now, acceptance is difficult. I certainly have told God that the situation was totally unacceptable, that I won't accept it, I will not surrender to it, only to really learn that it wasn't the circumstances I needed to accept, it wasn't the situation I needed to surrender to, but rather it was my acceptance and surrender to God. That He is God and I am not, trusting that one day I will have found myself having gotten through the valley of the shadow of death. My friends, what you need to know is that in the silence, your prayers have been heard. God has not forsaken you. The Holy Spirit is empowering you to move. Most likely kicking and screaming through your pain, but move, you can. So, when the questions dissolve into the silence of God, that aching may remain, but the breaking does not. The aching may remain, but the breaking does not. At the holy, lonesome echo of the silence of God. Friends, in the silence, stay faithful, keep trusting, keep obeying. You will bend. The entire direction of your life may change, but you won't break. You won't.